Have you been taught that sex and gender are interchangeable? With the current rise of trans and non-binary people, you would start to question if it really is true. As a transgender male, it is important to me to stress the difference between the terms sex and gender, and hopefully in turn raise hope and awareness for those that fall under the T in LGBTQ. Sex is the different biological and physical characteristics in men and women, like reproductive organs, chromosomes, and hormones. Gender, however, is defined as the socially constructed characteristics between men, women, and anything in between, like the norms, roles, and relationships that they have. Many people see sex and gender as different, also see gender on a spectrum, like colors, including extra labels such as non-binary, demi-girl, demi-boy, agender, bigender, gender fluid, and many more. Although most people's sex is either female or male, 1 to 2% of the world's population is intersex, meaning that they were born with both male and female genitalia or chromosomes. Many people insist that sex and gender are the same thing because they claim that it is unnatural any other way. Being born male or female is how people come into the world, according to them, and many people argue that they should fit into the gender norms and roles because of it. And yet, 1 to 2 of every 100 people are born with chromosomes that don't fit into the male or female stereotypes, like with XY or XX. For example, some have an extra chromosome, making their pattern XXY or XXX. We call these people intersex because their sex is not in the binary of a man or a woman. Most people will just accept this because it's biological and hence what God intended. And yet they don't find it natural to be non-binary or something else, which is just mental. I have no problem with God and religion. In fact, I think that religion is very important, not only to individuals, but to culture as well. However, since the Bible and the legends that make up the Old Testament were made at about 1200 before Common Era, the Christians believe that, according to the Bible, God made men and women, which is how it's meant to be. Even if biologically this was true and there were no intersex people and only men and women exist, things have changed since then. 3,000 years in the future, and the legends, frankly, could have been misheard or mistranslated. This is why claims should always be based on science and not on religion. Gender dysphoria is real. Gender dysphoria is the unease and uncomfortability that goes with the feeling that you are in the wrong body, as though there is a mismatch between your biological sex and your gender identity. This sort of agony is often confused with body dysmorphia, which is similar, but instead of wanting to change your sex, as a trans man, it would usually include getting rid of their chest and growing muscle mass, getting rid of curves that make them seem feminine, and having a lower voice. I assume that trans women are the exact opposite. Body dysmorphia, however, is quote-unquote seeing flaws in themselves and wanting to change it, like if their face or body is ugly or too fat, just wanting to change bits of it, just constructing it a little bit different, like you would see in the magazines. Still themselves, but only changed a little bit. This is often how eating disorders are caused. However, many transgender and non-binary people mistake their gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia and try to make themselves skinnier, assuming that that will fix the pain and claustrophobia that they feel in their chests. But of course, it never works. 1.4 million adults in the US identify as transgender, and 1.2 million identify as non-binary. When I try to explain gender identity, some say that, unlike in the 50s, 60s, and earlier, they don't conform to gender identity either. For example, when I tried to explain non-binary to my mom, she was confused and said that, well, since she didn't wear dresses or makeup, she could be considered as non-binary too. Just trying to make a point, but she's wrong. I can understand that if it was poorly explained, I understand her point. I do, but I have grown and I have researched, so I know how to explain it better. Some people would think that, sure, wanting to not wear dresses all the time, sure, would make me non-binary too if we're coming up with labels, but it's really much deeper than that. Really is. Of course, part of it is clothing, but it's really much deeper, and clothing is an output of it. A lot of it does stem from gender roles. Of course, back in the 50s in America, women were not only encouraged but expected to be suburban housewives who stay at home to take care of the house and children. Of course, this was progressively detrimental to some women, leading to sexism, with men thought of as superior and women as submissive. Because of the feminism, especially the radical feminism in today's, many women don't fall into this stereotype anymore. That also doesn't mean that they're non-binary. Gender roles were either hypermasculine or hyperfeminism. So it's not uncommon for younger generations like millennials and Gen Zers to throw that away and not want to conform to it, which is reasonable in my opinion. But not wanting to combine in old gender norms is not what makes somebody trans or non-binary. But it isn't unlikely that is the baseline for dysphoria to start. Older traditional people make claims that women are naturally nurturing and polite and subordinate, but nobody likes saying that anymore. Men, however, are strong and bold. And personally, I think there's some truth to this. Often, trans people long for themselves to be perceived as the exact opposite, but the opposite of their baseline stereotypes. As someone who has come across trans and has many trans youth friends, I've noticed certain things about people transitioning. Many trans males who were female born changed their wardrobe specifically, which is what the point my mom was trying to make, because they are trying to make themselves feel bigger and bolder, as if they're more in charge. I have noticed people, specifically at my high school, that begin to transition, attempt to dress more masculine and also more modestly and dressier as it demands attention. For transitioning females, it's harder because men are normally bashed when they dress as women and not so much vice versa. So they will grow out their hair, wear jewelry, sometimes perfume. Both types of people change their walk and their voice and vocabulary if they can. Trans males tend to talk louder, try to make their voice deeper and more blunt and honest. The trans females tend to be more polite, flirty, and typically quieter. Now, of course, my high school holds only a minuscule proportion of our nation's trans youth and adults, but I speak from what I know. Of course, not all transgender people present themselves or go through the same struggles, but I would assume that many of them are similar to what I mentioned at my high school, and a few that are a couple years older than me as well. I hope that I could provide some research and insight to you, and I also hope that I could help me raise hope and awareness for all the transgender people and allies. Have a wonderful day. And I did research, I promise. I'm just terrible with editing. So these, if you can see, are my sources, which I will have a link showing them in the bio. Thank you.